Ricky Thompson, former Baylor and Washington, what was Redskins wide receiver, and probably will always be like that for Ricky Thompson. And he's also the sideline reporter for Baylor Radio, joins us on 365 Sports, thanks to Alliance Bank. And Ricky Thompson is with us live with Craig and Paul and David Smoak. Ricky, how much does someone like Ketron Jackson, who's a go-to receiver, how much does that help a quarterback?
Well, Smokey, I think it helps more than an average fan can imagine. And I'm going to go back. It's funny you start with that question because I'm going to go back to the BYU game last year. And I know Blake took a lot of grief for some of his play during the season, and some of that's warranted, some of it wasn't. But I can go back to that game specifically and tell you 3 plays where we either had receivers cut off a route or weren't in the position Blake thought they were going to be, and he lets go of the football. And when that happens, a quarterback loses confidence, and that's not something you regain in one ball game. And you gain that confidence by a guy outside that goes to make plays. And I know we've talked about last year, too, that we had offensive line back, we had our defensive line back, we had all this experience. Well, guys, remember, we had none of our skill guys back. And I think that was really, really more of a problem than most of us realized it would be. I had a concern about that, but I think as the season went forward, you realized how big of a problem it really was. It was not a Taekwondo Thornton out there to make the big plays. And I just think the fact that from what I've seen so far, this guy's going to make a huge difference. He's going to go get balls, and he does that a couple of times. And Blake Shapen, Sawyer Robertson, whoever it is, the next time they see him there, they're going to let the ball fly. They're not going to hold it. They're going to let it go and have the confidence that he's going to go make a play. And you do that a couple of times, and then everything just snowballs and builds off the fact. So I think Ketron is going to be a huge key to this offense this year, as well as the rest of the experience gained from that receiving staff. I don't remember the catches last year, but it was almost comical how few catches that receiving corps had coming into the season.
Ricky, sometimes I think fans underestimate how hard it is for quarterbacks and receivers to get on the same page. You mentioned the confidence thing, or just that kind of it's also knowing how the receiver knowing how the quarterback likes to improvise, how if they have to break off, what are you going to do? Those things were just kind of non-existent last year. How much do you think that changes with this whole offseason, that they've been working almost specifically on just those kind of things?
Well, I hope it changes a lot. And I played with a guy that was as good at that as I've ever seen in Theismann as far as reading receivers. That takes a lot of practice. But just think of this in particular. If you've got a slot receiver lined up in the slot, you've got Monterey Bolin in the slot, and he's got an option route. And by option route, I mean he takes off with the ball. He reads whoever, if they flip a corner over to the slot guy, or if a safety happens to come up on Monterey, which I would love to see a safety on Monterey. But if they flip the corner over there and Monterey has the option to bring that route inside or to bring it outside, Blake's got to know by the way Monterey's moving where he's going, because he's got to throw the ball on time. So that experience of doing it over and over and over makes so much difference. And if you get to the point where you can do that in a football game, it's hard to cover guys. When you've got the option of going either way as a receiver and you've got a quarterback that can make that read, you've got 5 or 6 more plays a game that could be really big plays just because of the fact you've got a receiver and a quarterback on the same page.
Ricky, how does Richard Reese get better after an all-freshman Big 12, type of year a year ago? Now he's going to have a little bit more help. We kind of know the situation. He wasn't supposed to play as much as he did, as early as he did. He had to. But now he's got Dominic Richardson in the fold amongst some young guys coming up. Just your thoughts on how he improves and how that room improves this year?
Well, Craig, I think you named how he gets better. Dominic Richardson is how Richard Reese gets better. I think he's going to have much more competition back there. I know he's gotten a little bigger. He's got a year's worth of experience. As the plans would have been last year, he probably doesn't play at all. He probably redshirts and he ends up rushing for, 972 yards, just under 1,000. So this guy's going to be a lot better. I know in this wide zone, we keep going back to Abram Smith and saying fall forward, fall forward. Well, Richard really wasn't big enough to fall forward last year, and I think that's a big difference you're going to see in him. I think his speed is still there. He runs hard. I think you're going to see a lot more push out of him this year, just through experience, being able to cut up the field and not step in the backfield, taking time to look for where the hole is, just cut the ball up. And I think with the fact you've got a guy behind him like Dominic Richardson that's going to really push and play well when he's in there, will just make Richard Reese even better. And what a surprise, at least to me, he was last year. He was pretty darn good, guys, and I think he'll be better this year.
Ricky, there is always going to be player or 2 or 5 or whatever, depending on the team, depending on senior or player leadership, that will push the envelope. Dave Aranda stressed it and discussed it throughout last year, the disconnect even with coaches. He made changes with the staff. He has sent a couple of guys on their way, maybe didn't invite a few people back. He got a little more tough love, I guess you could say, and admitted that. How much does that matter in a locker room?
I think it's huge. I just think when players see teammates that maybe get by with things that they're not trying to do or they're not doing or their teammates aren't doing, and you get by with that 3 or 4 times, I think it builds some resentment, and I don't think that's intentional on the coaching staff's part, but I just think it happens. And I think that attitude and the closeness in a locker room is really fragile. I think it's always fragile. And to build that and maintain it, and with these moves that have been made, I don't know, even at the scrimmage last Saturday, I thought that those guys were really fired up to be out there. They seemed to like each other. And I mean, you don't have to love each other in that term, but you got to like each other. You got to have respect for each other, and you got to play hard for the guy next to you. And I think that starts with a coaching staff doing the right things, making the right moves. And they're not going to do it every time. It's impossible. But I think the changes that have been made, the fact that you brought in some transfers, that a couple of guys aren't going to be there that maybe last year would have still been here playing, and they're not going to be here. I think it speaks volumes. I really do.
Ricky, how hard is it for young guys also to realize when you lose, especially on defense, you lose a Jalen Petrie, who's one of the greatest defensive players that Baylor will ever see, and did things that people before him hadn't done before, and is really hard to do, that you as a young guy think like, okay, well, I'm going to step into that spot and I'll be the Petrie this year, but maybe you don't even realize how hard Petrie worked to get to that point.
Yeah, and I think maybe we all knew Petrie was good, but I'm not sure we really knew how much you're really going to miss a guy like him and Terrell Bernard inside. And it's not just the ability, Paul, it's the leadership too. And Jalen didn't say a whole lot, but he was always there. He was always making plays, and his voice was with action, and that's impossible to replace. And I think the one thing that does happen there, when other guys see how hard he plays, even if they see it on film, they want to replicate that. And I think eventually it does carry over. And I just think experience-wise, this team is much different than what I saw last year. We'll see how that carries over to Saturday. We know that's all that counts. We can scrimmage all we want, but until the lights are on, nothing counts. But I've just got to think that both offensively and defensively, this is going to be a much more experienced football team. They're going to play in that manner. I think they're going to be more confident. I think it's important to get a good start. Texas State, then you got Utah coming in week 2. So they're going to have to get their feet on the ground really quickly. But I just think there were a lot of factors involved in this team last year that we won't see this year, and I'm hoping that most of those are positive.
Ricky, could you sense that down on the sidelines? I mean, obviously you're next to all the action, so you hear things and see things that not everybody does, but it was evident from the 10,000-foot view, like just something's not quite right. And obviously with the changes that were made, we learned, more about, okay, yeah, things weren't, chemistry-wise the greatest, but did you sense that at the time, or was that more of an after the fact that everybody kind of caught on to that?
No, I mean, Craig, you're right. On the field is so much. I wish everybody could do it one game.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, you'd realize how fast that game is. Sitting in the stands, you can watch it. You can tell guys are fast, but until you're down there and you're right beside it, I don't think people really and you guys have been on the sideline, you don't really realize how fast that game is.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think with that and the things that I can hear down there, both from players on the field, from coaches on the sideline, I do think there was a bit of a disconnect. But I do know one thing, Dave Aranda's a pretty smart dude, and he has learned a ton from that. And if you get that benefit from it and you learn from it and you go forward, then I think you're in great shape. And I just think I can't put a finger on it, but there was just really something missing last year. And I go back and think, well, you really never had the guy outside that caught a 10-yard ball and took it to the house. Monterey did one. I guess that was Oklahoma State. I think, guys, where he really took one to the house. It was more of a 10-yard catch. But you need to see more of that. You need to see more of the big plays, the turnovers, interceptions, returns, and that type thing that builds momentum and gets you going. But it seems like this team just never really got over the hump last year, and I don't think they played with a lot of confidence. And I think that just really swept throughout the football team. And sometimes that happens. But, yes, I think you could tell it on the sideline, and I don't think it was intentional, but I think you could tell that there was a difference, no question, between that team you saw in the Sugar Bowl, Big 12 champions, and the guys we saw last year.
Yeah, I mean, no question about that. We've mentioned Jackson and what he can mean to Shapen. Monterey Baldwin's ability to be dynamic and break anything and go a long, long way. They have some dudes. They're young. They haven't really done it much. There have been flashes of even a walk-on and now scholarship player like Josh Camry, Amari Winfield, Hal Presley, Jordan Neighbors, and there's others, Bonner, others. Who among that group do you think will be the one that can or will or needs to step up?
Well, Monterey needs to step up, but the first thing Monterey needs to do is stay healthy. And I think that was a huge problem for him last year, staying healthy. And I don't know what all of the injuries were. I know he had some muscle issues, and sometimes guys that can run like that do. But sometimes you just got to play hurt too. And there's a difference playing hurt than injured. If you're injured, you don't need to play. If you're hurt, you need to play. And I had coach after coach that will tell you that, and other players see you play like that. But Smoak, I don't think I can name anybody in particular out there that needs to make it, but somebody needs to make the plays on Saturday that makes the rest of that football team look and say, you know what, I can do that too. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna make a play just like that. But it just takes one guy to do that at the right situation in the right game. Ketron goes up and takes the ball when he's got two guys on him, and one of them decks him, and he comes up with the ball and just points first down and walks back to the huddle. That's enough. I mean, yep. That'll get those guys to where they are really fired up. Richard Reese runs over somebody in the secondary. I don't know if you guys remember 2 seasons ago when Abram Smith pushed the Texas defensive back into the ground with a stiff arm. Yep. You saw the sideline when he did that. I thought they were going to kill each other on our own sideline. I mean, that, to me, that was one of the plays that turned that game to the point where there was no sneaking way we were going to lose. Not after that play. Yep. So somebody's got to make those plays, and you can make them in practice all day long. I remember Art Monk talking one time. We were running quick post type plays in games and just getting busted, and a TV guy asked him the best time to run that play, and he said on Friday in practice. So my point being, it's easy to make plays Monday through Friday. You got to make them on Saturday. And I think when you see that in person, in action, and the other guys feed off of it, I mean, we saw it 2 years ago. After that, everybody made plays.
Yeah, so it becomes contagious, yeah.
It becomes contagious, and I'm saying this because I think we've got the guys to make plays. I really do. I mean, last year we had, as I mentioned, we had all our front guys back, but we didn't have any skill experience anywhere last year. And I don't think that's the case here. I think you've got that experience. They just have to perform.
Ricky, thank you. We look forward to it every week based on availability, but also look forward to it thanks to Alliance Bank and their sponsorship of this segment and the one with JJ Joe on Mondays, both a part of the Baylor Football radio broadcast. Look forward to seeing you on September the 2nd. Have a great week.
Thanks, guys. Excited it's here.
Ricky Thompson, Baylor Radio Sideline Reporter, and also former wide receiver.